How did your parents fail you? When I was 8 years old, I walked in on my mother in the bathroom, passed out with a needle still in her arm. I screamed so loud, our neighbor came running over. She called 911 and then somehow got hold of my dad, who was 3 states away on another business trip. He flew home that same day, looking like he hadn't slept in weeks, and kept hugging me and saying he was sorry over and over. At the hospital, my dad made this huge speech about how everything was going to change. He said he was done traveling and would get a local job so he could be home every day. And with how tight he was clutching Mom's hand, I actually believed that for the first time in years, I'd have something resembling a parent. And for a while I did. Dad took this sales job in town that paid less, but he was there every morning to make breakfast and drive me to school. He'd pick me up every afternoon and we'd do homework together before going to visit Mom in rehab. He learned how to cook her favorite pasta dish so we could surprise her when she came home. But around month 2, Dad started getting these emergency calls during dinner. First, it was just 1 or 2 nights a week where he'd step outside to talk to some client. Then he started working late because he said the local job didn't pay enough and he needed overtime to catch up on bills from Mom's treatment. When he missed my first soccer game, he brought me a new video game and promised he'd be at the next one, but he wasn't. By the time Mom came home from rehab, Dad was basically working his old schedule again. Mom was fragile and jumpy and kept asking me if I thought she looked okay or if I could tell she was getting better. I started watching her constantly to make sure she wasn't using again. I learned to recognize when she was having cravings because she'd get this panicked look and start clawing at her skin until it bled. When that happened, I'd sit with her and we'd watch cooking shows until she calmed down. She'd always ask me if Dad was coming home with the flowers like he promised, so I'd lie and say yes, then steal some change from around the house and run to the store to buy a small bouquet. When Dad would come home around 9 p.m., I'd give him the bouquet and tell him to give this to Mom and say it was from him. The breaking point came 6 months after Mom got out of rehab. She had this massive panic attack that looked exactly like an OD. I called 911 and then tried calling Dad, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I rode in the ambulance alone and sat in the emergency room by myself for 6 hours while doctors asked me questions about whether Mom had been using again. The hospital social worker kept asking where my father was and why no other adults were listed as emergency contacts. I lied and said he was stuck in traffic from work. When Dad finally showed up, he looked completely disheveled, and his story about having a dead phone battery made no sense because I could see all my missed calls on his screen. After that night, I basically became Mom's full-time caretaker. I researched addiction recovery online and set up routines to help her stay stable. I monitored her medications and learned how to talk her through panic attacks. Dad started asking my opinion about work decisions and treating me like his partner in managing Mom's condition instead of treating me like his kid. The worst part was how everyone praised Dad for being such a devoted family man. At Mom's 6-month sobriety celebration, he gave this speech about our family's journey and how proud he was of how we all pulled together. Everyone applauded and told him what an amazing husband and father he was. I stood there knowing I was the one who had actually kept Mom sober while he focused on rebuilding his sales territory. When Dad announced he was taking a promotion that required travel again, I was done. I called my grandma and asked if I could live with her. When I told my parents I was leaving, Dad tried to guilt me about abandoning the family when they needed me most. I was 10 years old. 2 years later, when Dad lost his job and Mom had left him, he called me crying and asking for emotional support. He wanted me to help him process his feelings about his failures. I told him I hoped things worked out for him, but I couldn't be his emotional support system. I explained that he had taught me work and personal priorities come before family relationships, and I had learned that lesson well.